Hello and welcome again to Rough Cut. This is a review of Skyfall, the new James Bond film. Firstly, I'd just like to say I think that Daniel Craig has been a really good James Bond, even though his films haven't necessarily been the best. I thought Casino Royale was a real high point for the series. I thought it was fantastic, very gritty, dark, and going back to that very, very physical. And you get a real sense of the weight of the violence. I thought Quantum of Solace was then an ungodly mess and was everything that was wrong about Bond, overly complicated, all over the place, baddie secret base in the middle of the desert, whatever it was, all those mirrors, who knows what was going on there. So let's see what they ended up with the new one. The first thing is actually, before I even saw it, we had been exposed an awful lot to trailers that gave away way too much of the plot. There was just far too much in there to try and impress you. Before the film was shown, there was a parade of companies that have clearly sponsored James Bond, and it was very much a roll call of look out for these product placements in the film you're about to watch. So there was Heineken. One scene James Bond's drinking a Heineken. There's Omega watches. There's Jaguar, Land Rover, Range Rover, whatever it is. There's all this stuff. There's one scene. There's a Coca-Cola. So you've got to be aware of all that stuff. But at times it did detract from the film. But unfortunately, we're just going to have to get used to that and learn to just ignore it as much as possible and get brainwashed. Despite that, actually, there's an awful lot to like. There's a very exciting opening chase scene, as you'd expect. There's a very typically James Bond song. You can't hum it, but it's still not bad going. As I've said, Daniel Craig is a great James Bond. What's interesting is they've clearly thought very carefully where they want to take Bond. They've thought very clearly on what they've done wrong in the past. So they've set a clear path for themselves with this Bond, and they've stuck to that rigidly. So there are lines about, in the dialogue, there's lines about, in the past I've overcomplicated the plot. What were you expecting? An exploding pen, wink wink. And there's little bits and pieces like this throughout the film. Actually, I think they're a little bit contrived, but the sentiment is bang on. When Bond is given his goodies by Q, he's given a pistol and he's given a tracking device. So this is very much they've really pinpointed what they're after with this Bond, and they've really gone to it, and it really works. In terms of the baddie, the actor Javier Bardem is excellent. He's fantastic. He actually puts in a very convincing performance as a very eccentric, all over the place, but actually very, very sinister. And at one point he sort of feels up James Bond, so you think maybe he's gay, but he gives the kind of performance where it's multifaceted. There's he's absolutely bonkers and out there, but you actually might believe he's not two-dimensional. You might actually believe he's a proper character or a proper person. The other thing they don't overplay actually is the Bond girls. There's sort of two girls in the film, but it's not to the same ridiculous level you'd expect. With as if the supermodels are lining up outside James Bond's bedroom, or there's one in each scene, or one in each act. So that's all done very nicely. It's interesting actually as well. There's a classic Austin Martin, which is in it as a very deliberate nod to Bonds Gone By, and it's back to this again of making a very overt sense of we've made some missteps in the past, but there's classic stuff that we're still looking to hang on to. So all that is actually fairly interesting stuff. Thematically, we're looking at sins, past, changing times, things moving on. There's a lot of betrayal stuff in there, and age and getting older. So there's a very interesting stuff in there about Bond and how he's he really is on the ragged edge. He's alcohol and pills are sort of keeping him going, and he's got the weight of what he's done, and he's just generally getting older. M is in a sort of similar boat, so the two of them have an interesting sort of mother-son relationship. And without giving too much away, there's also a relationship then with the baddie. Which is but it's not overdone. There's a great cast there. Obviously Daniel Craig is a very good James Bond, even though Quantum of Solace was terrible. And the very solid casting, as I said, Judi Dench and Ralph Fiennes is also in there as well, doing very well. So to sum up, I mean it's a good film, and it's a very good return to form. It's a very deliberate return to form for James Bond. I think with what they're trying to achieve, it doesn't always succeed, but they're spot on with their intentions, and they're taking James Bond in the right direction. So you do sort of think, we're back on track. So there we go. So that's James Bond, and I do recommend it.